but I'll move this out of the way. Good morning, everybody. First off, it's great to be here in Fredericksburg. I was talking to a few of you yesterday, and my last tour in the military, I was in San Antonio. I was stationed in Fort Sam for 3 years. We've been around, Texas and Houston several times, gone up to DFW, Austin, of course, and even down in Corpus, right? But never up here. So fortunate to be here. Maybe next time I can bring my wife here. I know there's some good wineries here. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got an SUV full of stuff.
Okay, well, I don't know how much I can take back in the plane, but But yeah, so like Jason was saying, my background is not in agriculture. I'm here because Christy was able to reel me in, found me. I had a speaking engagement at the Texas Southwest Small Business Development Center, and she saw that I was presenting, and she figured, hey, this topic would be good for y'all, and hopefully I can provide some of that vision to alignment that we're going to talk about today. So, so with that being said, I know with y'all, what I do today is, like Jason was saying, since retiring, I've been able to help other leaders who have that same responsibility that I was able to have in the military. Serving 21 years, I was able to serve with the Marine Corps, with the Army, and some of not so nice places, right? In Iraq multiple times, in Afghanistan, where clarity wasn't optional, right? In those situations, I'm gonna talk a lot about clarity today. It wasn't optional; it was survival, right? And since retiring, I've been able to help other leaders who kind of have that same responsibility, help them focus in getting that alignment. They have that same responsibility where their decisions doesn't just affect their organization, it also affects, maybe their families and also the communities. And I think that's the same leadership that we have in this room, right? With the work that you all do. So, well, before we get started in doing anything, I just want to go over some of the things that we're going to talk about. I'm not here to provide any rah-rah motivation. I know that Christy wanted me to avoid that. I'm not here to give you all any motivational fluff, right? It's a workshop, so it's going to be very interactive. I don't want to be talking for an hour without any interaction, so I'm going to rely on you to have some interaction with that when we dive into the workbook that's in front of you, okay?
At the end of each of your tables?
Yeah, that's at the end of your tables, you'll get that there. The fact is, y'all already work hard, right? Y'all are doing the work. Y'all already care. Again, I'm not here as a cheerleader. I'm just here to help y'all, gain more clarity and help you lead better with your co-ops and your organizations. So, with doing some of these honest leadership work, it's going to require all of us here to, just be a little vulnerable, right? Be a little transparent, and also challenge our own assumptions that we may have when it comes to leadership, all right? Like I mentioned, we're going to go over some of the workbook. We're going to stop and reflect, answer some of those questions, right? And all I ask is just be honest with answering those questions. Don't write down what you think is the right answer, or just be honest with your answers and also amongst your table, okay? Now, with being honest, I'm not asking y'all to air out any dirty laundry that's going on in your co-op or whatnot, okay? This isn't group therapy. I'm not a therapist. That's not what I'm here for, but again, just be honest with your answers on paper and amongst yourselves, right? Because that's what we're here for. We're here to grow as leaders. The reality of it is that as leaders, we can't fix what we won't face. right? We can't fix what we won't face. Bad leadership, it doesn't necessarily come from bad intentions or leadership. It's more so leaders avoiding those hard conversations and avoiding those uncomfortable truths, okay? So my 3 asks from y'all today is, just be present, be honest, and also, like I said, just be willing to challenge your own assumptions. I know with the weather going on, if you have to go, please, go. But if we can do all these 3 things, I know that your time here will be worth it, right? And look, everybody here, y'all are Texans, right? I know you don't avoid hard work, right? I know you don't avoid hard conversations, right? But I know you prefer them to be honest, useful, and most importantly, finish before lunchtime, which the schedule says we're going to be done by 11, so we don't have to worry about that, okay? But yeah, so the reality that we're leading in right now, right? When we're talking about being honest, how many co-ops are out there, instead of working on their business, are working in their business, right? It was mentioned yesterday, I think it was Dr. Hudson, I wrote down in my notes. He mentioned a lot of things that could be going on, right, with tariffs, with the political instability now. He mentioned input costs, some of the changes in policies. You're dealing with all that as leaders in your co-op, in your organization. And then also you got to deal with serving your members, right? And then just as important, making sure that the coffee never runs dry. So, but yeah, if the mission isn't clear, right, activity replaces achievement. You end up being busy, but just because you're busy doesn't mean you're always getting better, okay? And what's the cost of that? Well, one thing, it could cost you misalignment. Greg had a lot of numbers up here yesterday. I promise this is the only slide where I have any type of numbers. All right, that was way over my head. But yeah, it's an important one though, right? 80% of leaders say that their team lacks a shared vision, right? 80% of leaders say their team lacks a shared vision. In co-ops, maybe in Texas co-ops, that doesn't just cost you profits, it could also cost you your reputation, your standing with your community, cost you legacy, right? Here's another research study. Gallup's global research shows that the number one thing employees want from their leaders is hope, which means having a clear vision of the future, and also just as important, what's their role in that future, right? So what does that mean for us as leaders? Well, again, it requires us to be clear, be intentional, and be consistent with the message that we're putting out to our team, okay? So how do good intentions go sideways? All right, so personal story here. Early in my military career, during one of our deployments overseas, I guess just to make a long story short, our plan fell apart, right? It wasn't because of the people, but because the mission was focused in the wrong direction, right? We didn't confirm intent, therefore we didn't focus on the right direction. There was a time early in my military career where, I was told that, hey, you have to be the loudest person in the room, which meant you were the leader, right? You had to be the loudest person. But I learned quickly that just because you're the loudest person in the room, it doesn't always make you the leader. You probably look like an idiot just being the loudest person, right? But you do need to be clear, and like I said, be intentional with your message, all right? Because I've learned that leadership is not just about volume, it's about clarity, all right? So what happens if nothing changes here? What happens if you take away nothing from this session? Well, when clarity disappears, that's when commitment dies, right? When clarity disappears, commitment dies. And that could lead to, your meetings multiplying, your morale dropping. We talked about misalignment that continues to grow, right? And pretty soon, the only thing that's moving fast is the rumor mill that's going on in your organization, right? So how do we lead better, right? How do we lead better? So this is where what I call the impact brief comes in, right? It's based on my military experience, leadership operating system that I've been able to use in my coaching program. Yes, in the military, we love our acronyms and our ditties. So yeah, this is nothing different, okay? So impact stands for insight, mission, right? Plan, alignment, communication, and time frame, okay? Today, we have about 90 minutes or so. We're gonna be focusing on the first two, which is insight and mission, right? Insight and mission. Because if you don't get those two right, then nothing else will stick. So that's the impact proof. So again, the key message here for this session is, having clarity before we start execution, right? In the Navy, before we launch any mission, we always had a clear intent and direction, right? In farming, that's kind of like the same thing, right? You don't harvest what you've never planted. Is that true? Okay, all right, that works. I'm gonna keep that one. And mostly? Okay. Well, how about in Texas, right? You don't send your tractor out there without checking the field first, right? But yeah, clarity before execution, right? Clarity before execution. Again, the two pillars, insight, mission. So let's go over the first one, insight. As leaders, we have to see beyond the soil. What does that mean? Well, the best leaders, they don't just work the field, but they learn to walk it, right? Insight comes from us just taking a step back and just asking ourselves, hey, what's really going on out here, right? What's really going on out here? And, we need to have that clarity before we start taking action. Experience can become a blindfold. Yes, experience can be a gift, but it can also be a blindfold. What do I mean by that? Well, have you guys had any leaders who said something along the lines of, we've always done it this way. Why do we need to change it, right? Or, hey, if it ain't broke, then why do we need to fix it, right? I see a lot of nods. Okay, cool. And then the next thing you know, the world changes. There's political instability, right? Input costs, like we talked about earlier, and they have no idea what they have to do. So, insight requires us to stay humble, have that humility, and just have that courage to say, hey, what may have worked in the past isn't what's going to work now, right? So again, the best leaders walk the field, right? Even the best farmers walk their fields, right? We can't always trust the gauges on our tractors, right? We have to walk the fields in our business. I don't know I think it was Dr. Hudson said something about there was a farmer that hadn't walked their cornfield in 10 years. I don't know if that was true. But was that it? You hadn't walked the fields in 10 years? So we can't do that, right?
Windshield farmer.
A windshield farmer? Okay. But yeah, we can't do that. We got to walk the fields in our business, right? All right. The core truth about insight. Here's the core truth. You can't lead what you don't first understand, right? You can't lead what you don't first understand. I think it was Greg, you mentioned earlier in the beginning, we have to, what was it? Oh no, that's later on. Sorry, Greg. Yesterday, it was in Christy's presentation, right? I didn't come in here, the last thing I expected to hear us talk about was yoga pants and spandex yesterday. But yeah, yesterday, Jason mentioned that if we use, 17% of cotton blend in yoga pants, we'd be able to use up all of the cotton in Texas?
Yep, in the United States.
In the United States, right? That stuck with me, right? Yeah, never expected to learn about that, learn about yoga pants and all that stuff. But, the key message that I want to say is, when we stop listening, then that's when we start losing, right? When we stop listening, we start losing. We got to always be learning. We got to always adapt and improve, right? Insight is going to be your leadership radar, right? It's going to have you remain curious, but you don't necessarily have to be in control all the time, right? Without insight, instead of leading, you could just be reacting to everything that's out there. So what does that look like in practice? What does insight looks like in practice, right? I mentioned before the most effective boards, the most effective leaders, you don't always have to be the loudest, right? But the effective ones, effective leaders, effective boards, they're the ones that are asking the right questions, right? Asking why now before how fast. Reflect before we start reacting, right? And again, replacing assumptions with observation. One thing we can all do is maybe, whether that be at the end of the week or the beginning of the week, maybe you all do it, but asking ourselves, hey, what's working, right? What's working? What's wasting our time? And what do we need to focus on to improve, right? All right, let's go ahead and dive into that workbook on your tables. Let's go to the first exercise, the foggy field, right? So go ahead, take about 5-10 minutes here and write down one area in your leadership where you've been maybe operating in the fog, whether that be you've been unclear or just been reactive in your leadership. And then the second part to that is, what do you need to measure, review, or clarify to get clear vision? Right, feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Give you all about 5 minutes or so. People started leaving early, huh?
Well, because of the weather.
Yeah, the weather.
Yeah, if that's the case, then normally no one would, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
Okay.
It's like it'll be 25 degrees when it's the
Okay. I was like worried I could shoot. Would anybody care to share their answers? What area in your leadership where you've been operating in the fog, whether you've been unclear or reactive? And what do you need to measure, review, or clarify to get a clear vision? What's that?
I said I tend to want, so I may get in sooner.
You tend to want
Don't
peace?
hold my ground.
Oh, hold your ground. Okay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
That's what I do with my brother. He drives me crazy.
Let's go ahead and move to the next one. The broken gauge or gouge. What is it? However you want to pronounce it. You can't make the right moves if your dashboard lies to you. Answer these following questions. What assumptions have you been treating as facts? Right? Gossip.
Same here.
There's a lot of that going around in the co-ops. I do now. I do now. Okay, that's a big one, I guess, right? Gossip.
I'm sorry.
Is she spilling out dirty laundry? The second part to that is, where do you need better feedback or data or honest conversations so that you can lead with accuracy? Where do you need better feedback, data, or honest conversations to lead with accuracy? Please.
Well, I just feel like sometimes it's better to know more about what's going on in the business than we actually do sometimes. Because I feel like a lot of the board, including me, don't always know everything, how things work. So how do you think?
Right. So
I have that same thought when you said something about walking the field.
yeah.
It's like how many of our directors.
Have been to every one of our locations or.
Right. You know, the co-op is more than just a customer.
Right.
Mm.
Or just on paper.
Yeah, or just on that. What do you know?
What's that Mark Twain saying about, well, they know things that just ain't so?
Yeah.
Was it Ronald Reagan? Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
In the context of I guess over a number of years, the ongoing merger of gens and that process, and each gen having to decide what they're going to do, and maybe some assumptions that we thought were facts, like, oh, our customer base is loyal, find out maybe what we're thinking about having to do.
How many of y'all can walk in gin and gin managers tell you?
Okay. What was that?
That's definitely a hard one there. Gin is such a complicated environment.
Link
Oh,
and where the dryers are and lynch labs and trash
with all the board members get really specific.
kind of get them to tell you what, and then when you go out there and they say, we're having trouble with number 2 lynch layer. And we need to add
we spend a lot of time telling you guys not to micromanage.
That's what I was just gonna say.
I was just thinking.
There is a need for, how do you get trustworthy information that's checked on whoever's in charge of doing that.
Right.
You're gonna have to come lead a trust fall class with us, Greg, 'cause I'm telling you, it's just gotta be a lot of trust between the board and the manager and
There
his
does.
managers, because
There really is.
otherwise you end up in that micromanagement spot, cause if I can't trust that the gym manager's telling the manager,
Well,
who's
it's like-
telling us,
It's circling the drain, you're just going down the hole.
So I'm hearing a lot of trust issues. That's what I'm taking back.
I will say, I have one board member that drives his own truck, and I probably have the most lengthy conversations with him in August after harvest is done about the issues that he saw. And it's not a micromanaged conversation, it's just,
It's a,
he sat in line, so he understood.
he lived it.
Yeah, he lived it, and so it's, you know, I try every year to jump in the truck with him, so then I'm kind of incognito, cause everybody works harder when they see my pickup pull on the plant. But, it is kinda nice to see that from that different perspective of, and getting it from him, but it is tough. You guys are busy harvesting and, you know, but to actually see a gym run at full operation, I think is a great idea for, whether it's an elevator or gym, it doesn't matter. I think as board members, that is something that you guys should take on and just go, man, I know it's a Thursday and I got cotton pickers in the field, but let's go see that module go from
yeah,
getting on the,
how long does it take?
how long did it take? Yeah. To go see the process and understand it, and it does help a lot. As a manager, speaking to,
But then it
not
also
my work.
helps for the manager to go see what a farmer has to go.
Yes,
through to get that
absolutely.
crop to the
Yep.
gym.
Sounds like a way to build trust.
That's some of the balance we're having, because our previous manager loved to brag about how nice everything was on the co-op and how good everything was, and I said, well, come walk around some of the farms right now and see what they're looking at.
Yeah.
Now you need to make the two, because you don't wanna be sitting there bragging to a farmer about how nice everything is that he's paying for while he's doing without on the farm.
Thank y'all for sharing that. A lot of trust building. Mental notes here, trust. All right, the next exercise is going to be how do we sharpen the blade, right? Time spent sharpening isn't time wasted. It's what makes the work effective, right? What are some of your daily or maybe even weekly routines to help you sharpen your blade?
AI.
Right? You said AI?
So, something in 'em, but yeah.
Well, you're laughing, but I think it's true. I think if you engage with the AI, it's basically,
Chat GPT? Yeah.
perplexing, you know, it does sharpen your focus. You just have to keep repeating it or it'll,
Yeah, you have to condition it right, a little bit. But
because it'll hallucinate things too.
that's a good point, right? We at times try to avoid technology or advancement in technology, but it can be beneficial, right, in the work that y'all are doing. So
And I do think I think farmers do a great job of advancing technology in their tractors and equipment and doing that. And then sometimes it comes to the gin or the elevator and they put those feet in the ground pretty hard. They're like, oh, we don't need to spend, $200,000 on some equipment to make it more efficient but they're very quick to get auto steer and that type of stuff. It's an interesting balance sometimes for a manager to walk that line.
So the second part to this section is who helps you to stay accountable, right? Is there somebody that helps you to stay accountable? What is it?
Do you, William?
That's a reload.
Your competition
A competition?
in the business.
Okay. Helps you stay accountable, huh? All right. So now that we're able to see clearly, let's talk about how we can define purpose. So we're taking it from clarity to defining purpose. And that leads us to the second pillar we're going to talk about is mission, right? Define before we deploy. Yeah, it was Greg that mentioned early in his session that, we have to know where we've been in order for us to know where we're going, right? Right. So that's essentially what we're talking about here when we define before we deploy. You have to know where you've been to know where you're going as an organization, as a co-op. Another thing is, when you know your why, your how becomes simpler, right? When you know your why, your how becomes simpler. So what is our mission? Well, mission, it's more than just a statement, right? It's more than a slogan. Your mission, it has to be clear. It has to be clear enough to remember. It has to be short enough to share. And it also has to be strong enough to unite, right? So those three things: clear enough to remember, short enough to share, and strong enough to unite, right? Your mission also becomes your leadership footprint, right? We talked about profits yesterday, how obviously in any business, that's definitely important, right? With profits equals passive income, we talked about. But also just as important as leaders, purpose, right? Profits keeps the light on, but purpose keeps the people going, right? And when your board and your members rally behind a shared vision, you stop pulling in different directions, right?
I really like that you brought up mission because, and I'll point at Jason because he's the manager, right? And I tell this to new managers, that the surest way to have everything going well with your board is do a strategic plan.
Mm.
Because that is exactly what it does. Your strategic plan is going to pull together the board and the manager into one goal. And getting back to what Craig mentioned about CEO evaluations, you can't evaluate a CEO if you don't have expected outcomes so that you know what the expectations of performance are. It all hinges on, you gotta know this. So, I like that.
Dr. Park, we changed strategic planning to leadership, what do we call it?
Development.
Leadership development, because I can't get my board to go to a strategic plan, maybe we can do a leadership development.
Call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
So,
But once you do it together,
Right.
that's what changes.
Awesome.
so if you're having trouble getting your board to go to a strategic plan meeting, maybe call it leadership development, and it'll, maybe changing the title will get them.
Call it barbecue, whatever.
Call it a retreat somewhere.
Do y'all do a planning session every year?
No, we don't, yeah. I tried to get them to do one, it's been a struggle.
Just have to do it smaller pieces.
That's kind of what we're doing, is
Yeah.
that I'm kind of putting it into the board meetings of talking
Yeah.
about things, so that way it's not a 2-day session, we're just
Right.
kind of talking about things, and we've changed it.
So when we're talking about mission-driven boards, right? What do they do differently? Well, first off, in every meeting, you got to keep that a priority, right? The mission. And when things get brought up, leaders, we got to ask ourselves, does this serve our mission, our current mission, right? Your mission statement shouldn't just be framed on a wall somewhere in your office or in your building. You got to keep it visible, right? And just as important, you got to live that mission, right? And how do you do that? Well, one thing you can do is you got to align your daily actions with that mission, right? Align your daily actions with that mission.
So I have a co-op that prints its mission statement on its monthly board agenda so that they see it.
You see it's visible, yeah.
Every line.
Yeah, that's good.
It's one of the better things I've ever seen.
Yep. We used to have that in our plan of the week in the Navy. It's always there, right? So.
Gary, one of the things that I saw when we did our strategic plan is it brought our board closer.
Yes.
It's never been before. It was really a positive step. In that aspect, it helped solidify some guys who were kind of a little bit off base, a little bit. Not completely back into the team, but it helped realign the team and brought a very positive outcome for the cooperative alcohol.
And Craig, those are the intangibles.
Yes.
If you're a guy like him or me, we're always looking for, he's looking for the numbers and I'm looking for the wording. But a lot of times it's the intangibles that are the most valuable. Because if you don't stay together, inevitably, eventually you're gonna have a stray or two. And it's the strays that start causing. And they stray, let's be honest about it, because they're not getting what it is the mission is. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be healthy, robust discussion about whether the mission is right or not.
Right.
But they don't even know what the mission is.
That's the problem. All right, so let's go ahead and turn back to your workbooks. The exercise mission rewrite, or field map, right? So write out your co-op's mission in one clear, actionable sentence. Does everybody know their mission statement for their co-op, or I'm putting people on the spot, right? Take a few minutes, answer some of those questions. What areas of your leadership are producing fruit? What areas are draining your time, energy with little return? And where do you need to replant? What areas of your leadership are producing fruit? What areas are draining your time and energy with little return? And where do you need to replant? And if you've written something down, anybody like to share some of the things that they wrote down?
Maybe like for the leadership
For which one?
experience for the first question.
Okay. Can you,
Controversy drains a lot of time.
controversy?
I'm the same way.
Oh, I do, I am, even everywhere, so I'm always the one to forgive.
Because what happens when like you hear a complaint, you give a lot of attention to a complaint, and it might
You
just
wanna
be
make it
one,
better.
might be one person.
And then I start thinking about it, and I think,
Yeah.
maybe we can get better by it.
Yeah.
Start thinking like it's bigger than what it should be, or?
But I think, I'm thinking about all of our clients sort of collective. I think that where I see the time and energy is kind of similar to what Sally said. Folks can't prioritize. So the disagreement comes, the conflict comes from not
Yeah, people
having
have,
shared priorities.
right.
So
And you
what,
don't have any results.
yeah, right, well, yeah, exactly.
That kind of
So-
ties into the mission, right? Like,
Right.
does this align with our mission or not? And if not, then that shouldn't be a priority.
I think the volatility increases too as the numbers have gotten tighter. So when you start saying
Yeah.
this is something and someone else questions, really something we need, or
Mm.
is that
I
something we're
thought we
wanting?
needed this. Yeah. Weird.
There's sometimes different lenses, different
Everybody
viewpoints.
has the best intentions, but whether or not it's a need or a want, different.
Yeah.
Really.
Is-
I'm not touching that either.
was that a hint at something? Or?
Here's the time to apply.
Yeah.
We have a great management.
Okay.
And we can trust what they tell us good.
Did you ever work there?
And it is taking, and they try to get people in the positions to carry on when somebody retires. We have somebody that can fill that, and that is, you need to look further than today out, the next generation.
Right. I'm glad you brought that
I've
up.
worked for nearly 30 years, and I told them the other day, everybody in that boardroom has been replaced since I started. And it works just as good today as it did the first day I started. Gosh, yeah, I'm gonna be gone one of these days. They
I
don't
think
have
you have a
anybody to
good
pick on, but.
management team, it's just a new management team. So,
You have a new management team,
and they're, it's,
they need you as much as you need them.
right.
Right.
They really do, they need your input
Yes,
a
yes.
lot.
Well, we have a balanced board, but again, it's also making sure that some of the senior members on the board don't have that blindfolded experience on how we do things, and some of the new ones don't get caught with going like, yeah, we need to get everything new and nice. Yeah, that's it. It's that balance there too.
I'm glad you brought up gentleman in the back, right? And it ties into the next exercise here. Building fences that outlast your generation, right? Go ahead and turn to that in your workbook. And when you're answering these questions, think about your leadership legacy. What do you want to protect, and what do you want to pass down, right? And to what was your name, sir? What was your name? Bruce. To his point, right? How are you preparing the next generation, right, to continue upon what you've already built? So, what do you want to protect or pass down, and how are you preparing the next generation to continue what you've already built?
We're in the middle of a huge transition. We have been for a long time. Generational demographic transition. That is really the question. If we're talking about the institution, or are we talking about the service? Are we talking about the most efficient picture for a combination of both? So, now we're right in the middle of that in every geographic area, so.
In every commodity.
In every commodity.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, I believe, the new generation, they don't like to do these meetings, right, in person. They prefer like a virtual Zoom, right, instead of like the one-on-one, face-to-face interaction.
I'd rather have it by text message.
Okay, text message.
And not talk to anybody.
Right.
So how do we get past that? How do we adapt as leaders?
You know,
Put the phones away.
with my staff, I have to put them all in one place and make them put their phones
Mm.
down. And they range in age from 22 to 45. Then there's us geezers.
Yeah, that's
I mean, you just have to do it.
right. Right.
Well, and to be honest with you, we're always saying all the things that we do right, but we do some things wrong. And one of the things we do wrong is we don't recognize that the next generation has a different method of communicating. And so we don't, when we could, even though we could, we don't involve them sometimes in their method. In
Mhm.
other words,
Right.
we're having a board meeting and two young guys
Yeah.
can't make it. But they could have appeared by Zoom or
You're right.
some other method, but we don't even think, much less allow, much less accommodate them. And so there's a little bit of resistance from the old users, and I'm talking about me, I won't point to him, and, in not going ahead and at least beginning to adopt some of that newer method of communication.
Right.
Because we think, by God, you better be here. Well,
Yeah.
And
What-
we even talked about too, and Gary knows this because him and I have had conversations about maybe making an associate board member position where they don't vote on anything, but they can start coming to meetings, especially the younger guy. I mean, you guys know my board, the average age is slightly older than me, and, you know,
It was diplomatic.
I try to be. But, so, you know, how do you get some of those younger farmers to have an opinion that, you know, our board is making 20-year decisions on some of this equipment, you know, and then Greg's depreciating it out 20 years for me.
20
So,
years.
Like,
That's a lot.
these younger guys have to start making the decisions versus the ones that could potentially be retiring.
Sad,
and-
by the time they come on the board, they go off the board.
Yeah.
You know, they don't get the training.
So by that time they're long gone. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think some of the younger people get
For young people.
What's that? Somebody?
fed up, I think some of the younger people fed up with some of the board processes, and that's the reason they quit, because they don't comprehend, like you said, you're looking at 20 years down the road.
Well, Bruce, I think what happens is, they're driven by the immediate needs of their business a lot more than thinking about the long-term consequence of what we have. In other words, they take what we have for granted because it's always been there. We say what it takes to maintain that and manage it for productive ROI into the future. That's really the key. And you know, it's a communication problem, and it's a priority problem. And you know, I mean, frankly, there are times when I throw up my hands and think, you know, this co-op model is built for a generation of people who grew up in our small communities and were used to cooperating at church, at school, you know, so that cooperation is part of the water we drink.
Hmm.
But it ain't gonna be that way. So, you know, it's a struggle. It's just a struggle. So,
Well, and I think we've got younger guys coming in, and I know Dr. Hudson talked about it yesterday. You've been farming for 30 years, you've got paid off land and probably paid off equipment. And then you've got a, guy fresh out of college that went and borrowed $250,000 for a tractor now, because they're not 20,000 anymore. And he's got a different perspective of how he needs the co-op to work for him versus, my board president has been president for 30 years. So it's a little different, return on investment for him versus that new guy that's taken over or whatever, so.
Do you have somebody that could take over for him if you're retired?
No, I don't have anybody on my board that wants to be president. And my vice president is on another board, so he can't be our president, what Gary told me.
Well, but I'm gonna defend your board a little bit. You do have a field of folks that have enough experience.
Yes.
If a tragedy beset whomever,
Yeah.
they could step in.
Oh, yeah, they would step in, but we're, and we're starting to, in the last couple of years, we have some now, 40-year-old farmers that are now on our board that when I first took over, 10 years ago, I think the average age of my board was 61 or so, and now we've gotten that down quite a bit in the last 6 years.
Tell my kids that, you know, me and Dad had a conversation before the past ways, the way the country, everything's changing, and he said something about it's my generation. How do you figure that? And he said, we was too busy making a living to get involved. And I've tried to tell them to get involved in things, not just worry about what's.
Yep.
Great conversation here. Great conversation. That leads us to the next exercise. You know, maybe instead of asking who we're mentoring, how are we mentoring that next generation? You know, somebody have something? So, who are we mentoring? How are we mentoring? And also, what's one decision that we can make today that will reflect our long-term purpose? Right?
Always get into the younger ones and discuss how you
Right.
plant that seed and let them think about it. Right.
Get their input. Right? Not everybody likes to be told what to do. They want to be part of the plan. Right? And the key thing here is, you know, mission isn't about what you do today. It's about who continues to do that work tomorrow. Right? All right. So bring it all together. We talked about the two pillars, insight and mission. Right? Insight helps us to see clearly beyond the soil, and mission helps us define before we start deploying. And the key message to take away from today, got to have clarity before we start execution. Clarity before execution every time. So before we wrap up, let me just say that you know, we're not going to be able to fix everything that's going on today, right? With a day or whatever time that we have. It's not about that. It's just, again, having more clarity in how we lead, so that way we can be clear in our message and be able to lead the next generation, right? So I'm hoping that you got some tools, some insights, right, that you can take back to your co-op, your organization. And if that's enough, awesome, great. Please use it. Don't leave it in your notes, hidden in your drawer somewhere, right? Please use it. But if you're sitting there and thinking that, you know, maybe our board can use this and can benefit from this, I'd love to have that conversation. This QR code is just to schedule my calendar for a free call. Be happy to have that conversation. But again, the key thing is, you know, leadership is not about the noise or how loud you are. It's about the clarity in your message and following through, right? Following through. So before I wrap up, you know, when I wore the uniform for 21 years, you know, I learned something that stuck with me after all those deployments. You know, leadership is not about the rank on your collar or the title that you have on your nameplate. It's about that responsibility that you have, right? The duty, the obligation, the responsibility that you're carrying. And for an organization to succeed, it's not just about one person, right? It's not about one person. It's about creating an environment for our members to thrive in, creating a system for them to succeed. And, you know, when we do that, we create a stronger mission for our organization, all right? You know, being in a room like this, like I said, with you all running your co-ops, serving your communities, you all are stewards of something greater and bigger than yourselves, right? Yeah. And I saw one, I was looking at the website, you know, you all are the backbone of Texas, rural Texas, all right? Again, I'm just, thank you all for having me here. Appreciate the time, and, you know, continue to lead with intention and live with impact. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. What I love about that is it's not just stuff you can use at your co-op,
Thank
but
you.
you can use at home and on your farm. We're a little ahead of schedule, so we're gonna plug right through here. I've got a paragraph to read, but I think everybody knows that. But please welcome our final speaker, Gary McLaren from McLaren Law Firm in Lubbock. As a special